All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. Lee's got a wonderful workshop for us today. When he told me the name of the workshop, I got excited because it sounds sexy. The Black Swan, right? Everybody likes a nice title, and the Black Swan I thought was a really great business workshop title that would key you guys in. So Jim Procaccini, do you mind doing the roll call? And then we have Pablo here. Pablo, do you mind introducing Lee? All right, Pablo, let's go ahead and introduce our featured speaker.
Yay.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Lee Crumbaugh. I can't say enough about the guy. He wrote the book on planning. As most of you have known, you probably had a one-on-one or attended one of his classes, one of his seminars. And when he talks, he really does command your attention because he's talking from experience. But more importantly, for me, is Lee Crumbaugh the man, the friend. It doesn't matter what questions you have. It doesn't matter what time of the day it is. You can reach out to Lee, and if it's not too late, you're going to get a response from him. He's a man that truly loves life, and that's every area of his life. He just gives 100% of what he has to it. As of recently here, he's become a sailor, and he's taken that head on. And I'm sure you've come leaps and bounds from when you were a year ago when you started. You're probably skipping a boat by now, aren't you? But when he shared the title of this presentation, I couldn't miss it. I kind of have an idea of where he's going with this because it's very relevant. So without further ado, here's our friend Lee Crumbaugh, and please pay attention because this is going to be really, really good.
Thank you, Pablo.
You're welcome.
Let me get my screen up here, and let's go to full. Come on, go to full. There we go. There we go. Okay. Yes, indeed, there are black swans, but they are rare. And a black swan is not something that generally is good. Think about, do you remember when the earthquake and tidal wave hit the coast of Japan and basically took out the TEPCO nuclear reactors? Whether that event could have been foreseen or not is in debate, but it certainly was not expected. And that earthquake and tidal wave contaminated a whole chunk of Japanese coast, killed some people, and really changed that part of Japan forever, probably, or at least for a meaningful, huge period of time. So let's talk about black swans. Nassim Nicholas Taleb wrote a book called The Black Swan, wrote a book, and he defines a black swan as an event that is outside of what we would normally expect, because the history does not suggest it's going to happen, or else it's highly unlikely. And a black swan carries an extreme impact. Now, black swan has a third characteristic, which I didn't list here, is that after it hits, people try to say, well, yeah, we should have expected that. We could have seen that, and we didn't. Well, the reality is, if you could have seen it, if you could have expected it, we would have expected it and maybe even prepared for it. So black swans are always unexpected. So they change the world for those who are not prepared for them, which means for most of us. And of course, we can talk about the pandemic as a black swan. Now, we could debate, Bill Gates was trying to tell us, 5 years ago, prepare for this, it is going to happen. He put some of his money into helping do some things that would prepare us for a global pandemic. But the reality is, nobody really listened. We didn't expect it. It wasn't on our radar, but it's fundamentally changed the world for us. What about the protests over Black lives and police violence? Could we have expected that? Yeah. Is that a black swan? I'm not sure if it matters. The point is, it is bringing huge change that our institutions have to deal with, and we personally have to deal with. So one could argue that we have two major impacts right now, fundamentally changing things. I was talking to a member of this group some time ago, and this person described his feelings and responses to the pandemic and what it did to his business and his emotions. And I said, "Oh, do you know the Kubler-Ross model?" He said, "No, I don't." So I explained to him that Kubler-Ross, she was a psychiatrist who in the late 1960s wrote a book called On Death and Dying. And she talked about the stages of grieving that people go through, either anticipating their own death or when someone close to them dies. My late social worker spouse introduced me to Kubler-Ross. Later, people studying change and the impact of change on us decided that we went through the same sort of process. We go through the same sort of process when confronted by big negative change. So I said to our mutual friend, who I'm not identifying, "I think you are in depression right now. I think you're just knocked back and hurting because of the pandemic." So the stages, as you can see, is shock. Oh my God, something big is happening, negative. Oh, that's not necessarily going to affect me or us. Oops, it is affecting me or us. And what I've achieved or accomplished or where I am is being challenged. I'm experiencing loss, erosion. I'm angry that this is happening. And then that leads to depression. Well, now what? My world has changed. It's not good. I want to withdraw. I don't have energy. So what happens? Well, most people can't stay in that state forever. So you start trying things. Well, what can I do? When I dealt with my clients and the people I've helped replan, what I'm seeing is a lot of people have thrown a lot of stuff up against the wall. Well, let's try this. I could do this. I could do this. Maybe chasing different shiny objects. How do I change? But out of that experimentation, there is some kind of a path identified that holds at least some hope. And so people are learning to work in this new situation. We're learning how to network to network virtually and to make contacts and do one-on-ones. And then ultimately we integrate that into how we function. And I didn't mean to change that, sorry. How we function. And I did it again. I'm just trying to move your beautiful faces because I can't see the end. Okay, integration. We integrate that new way of operating, of behaving, of thinking, and move forward. Now, a couple things about the curve. You can get stuck at some point. There may be people who never get out of that lowest point. And also you can backslide. You know, sometimes the solution you think you found isn't really the solution. And also you don't necessarily go through every stage in the same order. But generally, this is how it works. And looking back, I've identified the points in time when I was at each of these stages. So I would just ask you to examine for your own life over these past 3 or 4 months. Have you gone through this, and where are you now? And how's that working for you? I hope it is. Okay. So the theme of this is we underestimate change. The rules in this case have changed. Businesses have folded. You know, I can drive around downtown Annapolis and see the brewery that's out of business. I can see the art gallery that's out of business. And there's a lot, it's like the iceberg, there's probably a lot more going on that we don't see. Businesses have folded and failed or are in jeopardy. Now, we always have risk exposure. But the thing is, we really don't plan much for that risk, right? Our normal, as this Foursquare shows, is where we are in our annual business plan. It's business as usual. It's here's how it works in my business, in the world, normally for me, and I'm just going to go out and operate that. I'm going to paint faces, right? I'm going to, you know, whatever your business is. I'm gonna do your graphic design. But what happens when people have no money for graphic design or aren't selling anything, or when your clientele, like John, a significant part of your clientele was restaurants? Whoops. That business as usual can go away very quickly, but we don't do things we don't understand that. We don't recognize that. Now, change is usually, more often, that orange square, which I've labeled drift, which means we know things are always changing a little bit. I mean, the stoplight is put on the street and there wasn't a stoplight there before. A law gets passed. Demand goes up for some product that didn't exist a year ago. So there's always those little changes. Taxes are raised. They're not necessarily positive. They can be. And so, but that kind of change is hidden, unrecognized, or if it is, it's annoying or it's pleasant. That usually isn't make or break for our business. I mean, it can be if that little change directly changes something important to our business, but it's not Black Swan. It's not huge. So we can ignore that change generally. Now, some people can see those little changes and figure out how to make money on it. You know, people who want to work, who wanted to work, not from home and not for a company, so they needed an office for gig work. You know, the person who thought of the shared office, that was more like drift. It became a bigger change, but in the beginning it was more like drift, and they figured out we could capitalize on this. Drift over time, and especially drift in a lot of domains, can lead to a great impact. It just takes time. What's the green square? Well, when we do our strategic plans, when we look into the future and we say, you know, people are going to need more help in investment strategies, given the complexities of the future environment. So I'm going to position myself to be able to offer that kind of help, right? Or companies need better solutions for their benefits needs. So Helen and Cheryl, their organizations, are positioned to provide those kinds of solutions. They're betting on trends and forecasts and what they think the future is going to look like. That's what we plan for. That's where we place our bets and investments. And if it pays off, we do really well. You know, that's how the world is, quote, supposed to work. The problem is the red squares there. We have high impact, less predictable events, the ultimate being a true black swan. You know, a comet hits Arizona, right? Or big meteorite, and, you know, takes out of town or something, whatever. Black swans, you can look back and see that they happened. The Japanese could have seen, had they gone enough centuries back in history, that a large tidal wave did hit that coast. But they did not look that far back to understand that actually there didn't even have to be a black swan. That could have happened. But in any case, big change that we don't see coming or we underestimate is that red square. And that can really derail our strategies, our business models, and our businesses. So what do? Well, part of it is when you are aiming your strategies at the green future, protect yourself from the red future. Find a strategy that does get you down the road toward that green future, but is not so all in that if things don't go perfectly, you're in trouble. So what I like people to think about when thinking about this is have a rainy day fund. I mean, that's one thing you can do. Meaning, if things aren't going to go well, have something in reserve. Also, multiple streams of income, right? If something takes out face painting, maybe you've got something else going that you can push forward on. In my case, I had both strategy consulting and 2 kinds of coaching, one-on-one and group. And fortunately for me, I had group coaching because that has been my way through. That wasn't clear in the beginning, but that's been my way through. It's been group coaching. Hopefully, the one-on-one side of things will grow more, and organizations will want to look at their longer-term strategies as they work through this very upfront and in-your-face time. Now, a few people win big, right? There were some investors in the Great Recession in 2008 and 2009 that anticipated it and just made, you know, really did well. But that's, how do you predict that? And, you know, unless you're either really lucky or a genius. And, you know, I'm not a genius, and I'd love to be lucky, but I can't plan for it or bet on it. So instead, I want to hedge. I want options. I want a way to protect myself and my business from these unexpected events that will happen. They will happen. If you go back in your lifetime, you can point to things. Vietnam War, you know, not just war, but the Great Recession, disease now, etc. You know, if we went through, we could, as a group, we could identify those kind of events that have had huge impact on us and on our society. Okay, let's, all right, so why is it that we can't deal well with change? And, you know, that we don't do a good job of planning for change, or at least protecting ourselves against change? Well, I've identified, and I'm not going to go through all these now because we don't really have the time. So this can be another presentation, but I've identified right here, here's 20 mental traps, biases, heuristics, which means shortcuts that usually serve us well, but sometimes don't. So It's an our priority problem. If big change is rare, we have trouble predicting it because we can't get the data. We don't want to hear bad news, so we kind of whistle past the graveyard. It's base rate neglect, which means uh, we really don't look back and understand the real probabilities of things. Just as I said, if the Japanese regulators had looked back far enough, they would have said, this is not a good idea. We're conservative when we make predictions. We don't even recognize that black swans can happen. Hopefully you do now recognize it. We always prefer now rather than some other state, current moment bias. We think we have the information we need, epistemic arrogance. There's evidence out there of things, but guess who writes the history? The winners, not the losers. It would be really interesting to read a book about the world written from the standpoint of the losers, because then you'd see better the reasons you need to hedge and have options and protect yourself. Forever changeless. Things don't, it's going to be the same. Future blindness, we just put blinders on and don't look at it. We put stories around facts when we don't really have enough facts to justify the story. Oh, that's in China. It's not going to come over here, right? That's in Wuhan. Where the hell is that? It's not going to affect us. Normalcy bias. Yes, very much so. We want normal. Overconfidence. Probability neglect. Risk blindness. We don't see risk. Selection bias. We cherry pick our information. Status quo bias. That's huge. That's huge. We want the status quo. Sunk cost fallacy. We want to stay with what's worked for us before. In part because we want to justify that those were good decisions we made previously. System justification. There's a reason the world is as it is and it works. We want to defend it. And traditional wisdom. This is how it's always been done. Things aren't going to change. No need to change how we approach and think about things. Now, am I a genius? No, I'm affected by all these things too. We all are. But the first step in doing something about it is recognizing it. Okay, but let's say we could say that maybe our big organizations have it figured out. No, they don't. They don't. Think of Kodak, which owned the rights to digital photography, but refused to get out of film photography and make digital the way to go. They had the keys to their future, but they were so invested in how the world was and what people wanted that they did not move when they really needed to. Or BP, drilling that deep well in the Gulf, despite a lot of dire predictions about it, and despite mounting evidence as they were drilling that this was not going to come to a good outcome, ignoring the experts, ignoring all the signs that this was going to potentially be a real disaster, and it was. Or Sears, which tried to maintain mall stores forever when the evidence was find another way. Don't just stick to your formula, because any smart observer could see this slipping away and could see that it was not going to change. And you could say the same thing ultimately about a J.C. Penney and really about any big mall retailer. That's not a good future. There's probably a better way to lose money or make money than maintain those kinds of institutions, no matter how much we might like them. So big organizations protect the status quo as well. There's tools that they can use that we can use, but that organizations can use to get out of that trap. Look for risks, look hard at competition, especially new disruptors. If I owned a taxi cab company and I all of a sudden saw ride sharing, I'd say, maybe this is a good time to sell my taxi cab company, right? Or invest in ride sharing stock. Anyway, worst case forecasts, factor the potential risk into your decisions and your strategies. And this, I did some research with a whole bunch of uh, business leaders and asked them whether their organization used these tools or not. So, you can see none of these tools are used by a majority of organizations. And here's some more of them, right? Cut your exposure to potential negative black swan events. Now, you can have positive, some people call them white swans, except white swans are common. So I don't know what the name is, but sometimes big things can happen, big change can hit us. That's wonderful. So just like you're supposed to get, have well, I don't know if it's a put or a call, Pablo, I won't use that terminology, but, increase your exposure to doing well if good things happen. Decrease your exposure to doing poorly if bad things happen. So try to model the risks, develop scenarios. What if our major customer went out of business? What do we do? There's two things good about that. You have a path to follow if that actually really happens. And it also shows you the impact on your organization. So why not now develop that other line of business or other customers, or decrease your exposure to one big customer, for example. I've always thought it would have been so lousy to be a supplier to GM, right? Because if GM runs into trouble, you're in a world of hurt. Yeah, it's good when it's good, but that exposure to one huge customer is not a good thing ultimately. You could simulate the future or war game it to see how it might go. And this is the one that I love, that I encourage all of us to do. Conduct what's called a pre-mortem. I know you know what a post-mortem is. That's when the doctor, the medical team stands around and says, okay, what went wrong? Why did the patient die? What can we do next time so this doesn't happen? A pre-mortem it's as if our strategies fail, as if things don't work out, and say, well, so therefore, you try to put yourself in the future and look back and say, well, what could have gone wrong? Well, this is what could go wrong, right? In the case of a GM supplier, we're so dependent on one company. Maybe we ought to have another line of business where we've got a bunch of other companies we can expose ourselves to, or at least get Ford on our list as well as GM, for example. Okay, I'm not going any further. I've developed, and I'm trying to finish my book about tools and methods, including a decision-making framework that you can use to make better big strategic decisions. If you're interested, you can go to my website, forrestconsult.com with 2 R's in Forrest, and go to the blog section, and you can read my full blog post, The Black Swan and Us, which this presentation is based on. Okay, I'm going to get out of sharing. I'm going to close my mouth, and I'm going to listen to you people.
Thank you, Lee, very much.
Hey, Lee, if I could jump in. This is exactly what I was thinking this presentation was going to be. And just as you were talking about looking back at what just happened here, we really got hit with two big black swans, COVID-19 and oil, when it comes to the financial markets.
Okay.
And who could have predicted that there were literally going to be supplies of oil with no takers? 2 months ago.
Or how about negative interest rates, Pablo? That some central banks will pay you, right?
Well, it's the other way around. You
Yeah,
pay.
right. You'd pay the central bank
You pay the central banks to hold your money.
right.
Not so much of a black swan per se, because that has been going on in Europe for some time now. If you look at Germany, especially shorter term bonds, they've been running on negative rates for a while. Here in the United States, the Fed is very committed to not let that happen. Not sure what tools they may have available for that, but it's going to cost either way. But those two black swans, I mean, like you said, nobody could have predicted COVID-19. But if you look hard enough, at least in financial terms, you could have seen some signs of some deterioration prior to this. I attended a workshop in January, late January, with Goldman Sachs Investments. And they said, look, the probability of a recession in 2020, at that moment, they said it's about 17%. However, if there is a recession, it's going to be event driven. And maybe they were thinking COVID-19, this virus in Wuhan, China, could have an impact back then, but nobody knew. Nobody was talking about that. So what do you do to prepare for those things? I mean, it all comes down to what do you do with your own finances? Because it comes down to that. What do you do, right? Do you have that 6 months reserves? Do you have a backup plan if your company lays you off and now you have to look for health insurance? What do you do to replace your benefits?
Leverage is good when it works for you.
Talk to me, Pablo.
Yep.
Leverage is bad when it works against you. And when you're all in on something and totally leveraged, when life goes well, hallelujah. And when it doesn't, you're in a world of hurt.
Yeah. But thank you, Lee. That was fantastic.
Great job, Lee.
Thank you.
Helen, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I do. Lee, again, fabulous, thought-provoking talk. I'm very happy, and I think I'm very wise when I signed up for Lee's strategy planning, because during this, I've had to adjust to changes. About 25 years ago, I read a book called The Gift of Change. I pulled it out the other day, and it's very much aligned with, of course, Lee's thinking. Change is going to come. You know, as a teacher, looking at the educational part of this, you know, history is something that we're not really, it's not a major issue for people to learn about our history. But, you know, if you go back far enough into history and into the Greek philosophers, you know, a lot hasn't changed much. We've become innovative in certain things and fallen behind in maybe our mindset. So I love this talk, Lee. Thank you for bringing it to the forefront.
Thank you, Helen. Laura, did you have a comment? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I just said great presentation, Lee. I just finished Simon Sinek's Infinite Game, and I'm actually reading a book. Oh, I read 2 books. It's okay that I'm not okay, which is about grieving. And then I'm also reading A Beginner's Guide to the End. And just the one thing I would add is that the Kubler-Ross is about folks that kind of have that they're processing their death. And so there's actually some more stages of grief when you're like grieving a loss. So, you know, it's any of those feelings that you're feeling right now, 100% normal, whatever that is. And it's definitely, you know, my personal loss, but also just the changes in my business. Those 2 books have really been helpful in the past couple of weeks.
Good.
Highly recommend them.
Cheryl Cage, where's my cheese?
Right here. You need it? I have your cheese.
But I gotta tell you, Infinite Game by Simon Sinek is amazing. What a phenomenal book, right? Everybody wants their business to go on indefinitely, but they play with a finite mindset. You can't do that. If you want to play an infinite game, you have to constantly be looking for that next thing, constantly be looking for the change, constantly be looking where you're going. You can't stay stagnant in an infinite game. So phenomenal book.
Sarah's already read it. There you go.
John, I'm so impressed with the knowledge that this group has. I mean, everything from Greek philosophers to current events, and certainly a plethora of books. Of course, mostly Cheryl read them all, right? But it's a well-educated group.
It is. And Lee,
We even got authors, right?
Lee, you always impress me when you can go through all those little things and tell us all the definitions. I'm like, and this is the definition, and this is the definition, and this
Well,
is.
John, when you've been writing a book for 5 years, you tend to learn a few things, and it sticks. I'm a slow learner, but I do learn.
May I also recommend a timeless book called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And I think I'm reading another book called Guns, Germs, and I can't remember this title, but it's Guns, Germs, and something.
And
Warfare.
Steel.
Steel.
And then there's always Lao Tzu and Sun Tzu, which I always get the two mixed, but whichever one you remember and you start reading, you'll be fine. Thank you very much, friend, for this.
Everyone put the names of the books they just mentioned in the chat.
Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond. And yes, Marcus Aurelius. I've read all of those. Good books.
And The Cat in the Hat. The Cat in the Hat. And oh, what a boon. So after reading that heavy duty stuff, let an apple fall on your head and that's what you get.
The Cat in the Hat.
You go read all these wonderful, really deep things, which I do. And then there's, what's that French guy? Memories of Things Past. That's like the thickest, densest book in the world. Go read the dense and then get something lighthearted or go scribble, and then it will make sense. Don't attempt to understand necessarily in the moment of reading.
Okay. Just read it and absorb it later. That's what I'm talking about.
Somebody said a book, and I opened my library page to put it on my hold list, and it's not one of the ones that's in the chat so far. I feel like it was one of the first books mentioned. If anybody remembers. Ed?
Helen, what book did you recommend? Hold on, let me unmute Helen. Helen, unmute real quick.
You're talking about the Simon Sinek book?
Infinite Change, I just read.
Okay. So if you want a very hard read,
Infinite Game, that's what I meant to say.
if you want a very hard read, but to learn more, read The Black Swan
Okay.
by Nicholas Nassim Taleb. It's not an easy read. Slightly easier, but still really game-changing. Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner.
In the chat, Lee, so I can go back.
Okay.
I put
Okay.
mine in the chat.
Thank you. I'm searching for that. And also, Anne Arundel County Public Library has a lot of these books on audiobook. So I put them on when I go for my run, and it's enjoyable. So thank you.
That's
Real
awesome.
quick, a lot of people know that in our company, we read books together weekly. We've already completed 20 books as a company, which is kind of cool. But you were mentioning The Cat in the Hat. We actually read a children's book. One of the children's books that we felt was a huge addition to our business was The Missing Piece Meets the Big O by Shel Silverstein. So if you haven't read this book, though it is like one word on a page, it's a really easy read. Read to a child or a grandchild, but you will get so much business sense and knowledge out of this children's book.
I think it's also a good idea. Sometimes I'll buy 2 books and write in one of them. So I know books are sacred. I love them. I pay attention to them. I don't dog ear them. Yes. So there you go. So you can, right, you have your copy. I'll pass it to friends, and you have your other ones. I wore this book out. So feel free to doodle in your books. And there's a really cool book called Doodle Beach. Do I have it handy somewhere? By the Face Paint Lady. So where is it? Oh, thank goodness. It's right here. This is what a doodled book looks like. And then you go on a nice little journey through newspapers with magic markers. And they're also available for a limited time only, $99.99. It's great. It'll save you on years of therapy, I promise.
May
Is it on Amazon, Michelle?
No, it's in my studio. Lee.
I see.
Chat me up. You know, give me
They
a chat
actually
and I'll
sell
do
that.
something. Not
They
only
actually-
$99 for a limited time, $99.99. If you're under 12, it's $10.
At the library, at the bookstore, there is a book like that called Wreck This Book, Wreck This Journal, that allows you to do that. So it'll tell you what to do, like scribble hard on this page or paint a picture on this page. And the whole idea is to trash the entire book creatively.
So what happens if I paint on the scribble page and scribble on the paint page?
There are no rules. That is
That-
absolutely
yeah.
fine. My
So
girls
I
have
have
those books. They love
A
them.
dishwasher in a box. I got a dishwasher delivered to my home yesterday to be installed tomorrow. Right now I'm using it as a piece of furniture, but I should wear that box out.
You should.
So I need a series called Wear That Box Out. Okay, thanks, Cheryl. That was brilliant.
Hashtag. Guys, y'all are
Wear
too
that
funny.
box out.
It's 9:05. Thank you all very much for coming out tomorrow. We've got Brian Lobeg from a BNI off of the metro area, and he is going to talk to us about personal brand SEO. So tomorrow we'll have a new speaker, brand new topic, Wednesday at 11:30 a.m., and I'll see you guys next time.